there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them. And from the cloud, a voice said, This is my son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and they were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, Get up and do not be afraid. And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. The word of the Lord. There are moments in our lives that we wish we could just kind of freeze and hold on to them forever. You know those kind of moments, and everything seems clear. The anxiety calms down. And God feels close, almost close enough to reach out and touch. We wish we could, put a sign up for others to see. It's like, I'm not available. I'm just going to stay right here for a while. Well, this passage in Matthew 17 gives us one of those moments. Jesus goes up on a mountain with a few of his closest friends, and something happens that leaves them stunned and awestruck and completely unwilling to leave. It's no surprise that they want to stay. If you've ever been on a retreat or a mountaintop hike or had a late night conversation where faith suddenly makes sense, where you get it, there are seasons when prayer feels natural, worship feels alive, and God doesn't seem distant at all. And we want to cling on to those moments because they reassure us that faith is real, that hope is not foolish, and that love really does win. On that hilltop, the disciples see Jesus in a way they had never seen him before. They get a glimpse of glory, purpose, and God's presence, all wrapped up in one. And once you see something like that, the last thing you want to do is walk away from it and go back down the hill into the noise and the uncertainty of everyday life. While on that hilltop, Peter blurts out what everybody else is thinking. Let's stay. Let's build some structures. Let's build something permanent. Let's take this moment and make it last. That's such a human response. When life finally feels steady, we don't want to change. When God feels close, we don't want distance. When the path ahead looks hard, we'd rather stay where it's safe. There's a woman from a congregation who described her experience on a church youth mission trip. Even though she was the adult leader at the time, she said it wasn't the work projects or the schedule that really stuck with her. It was the evening worship. Every night after a long day, the group gathered in a room. Somebody played guitar, usually just a bit out of tune. Teenagers who barely spoke during the day sang out like they meant it. She said she felt lighter than she had in years. Her worries about her job, her aging parents, and her own health fell into the background. On that last night, she found herself praying, God, don't let this end. And then came the bus ride home. Laundry piled up, emails waited to be answered, and the glow faded faster than she expected. And she said, I wanted to stay on that mountain, but life didn't give me the option. And that's the tension in this passage. The mountain is real. The experience is authentic. God truly meets them there. But the story doesn't end on the hilltop. It can't. Because the mission of Jesus doesn't stay elevated if it's untouchable. It moves downward into the crowds, into conflict and suffering, and eventually the cross. What's striking to me is that Jesus doesn't scold the disciples for wanting to stay. He simply leads them down the hill. And there's a tenderness to that. God understands our desire to hold on to moments of clarity and peace. But God also knows that faith is not meant to be preserved under perfect conditions. Faith is meant to be lived out where people are hurting and confused and searching. And this is where the season leading to Easter comes into focus. We would all rather jump from that hilltop to the joy of resurrection. But the road has to go downhill first. It winds through misunderstanding, betrayal, and grief, and suffering, and fear. The disciples don't know it yet, but the mountaintop is a preparation, not a destination. What they see there will have to sustain them later when everything feels like it's fallen apart. Isn't that true for us? Those mountaintop moments that we've had in our lives, powerful worship moments or answered prayers or meaningful conversations, they're gifts. They're not meant to trap us. They're meant to strengthen us for what comes next. If faith only works when everything is good and peaceful, in this world, it won't last long. Real faith has to survive the descent. I feel there's also something very deeply Presbyterian in this moment. We talk about God's sovereignty, about a faith that engages the world rather than trying to escape from the world. This story reminds us that God's presence is not limited to special places or perfect moments. The mountain reveals who Jesus is, but the valley reveals what that means. It means healing the sick, welcoming the outcast, challenging injustice, and walking with people through suffering. As the disciples head down the mountain, Jesus tells them, keep quiet about this, at least for now. And that's important. Why? Because glory without context is going to be confusing. Without the cross, the mountaintop doesn't make sense. Without Easter, the descent would be unbearable. Everything has its time. Revelation comes in stages, and faith grows when we walk, not when we stand still. Many of us are tempted to measure our faith by how often we feel inspired or uplifted, but this passage gently pushes back on that. The real test of faith is not whether we want to stay with Jesus on that hill. The real test is whether we're willing to follow him down the hill, down into the places where love is harder and hope feels more fragile. As we move toward Easter, this story invites us to ask some honest questions. Where are we trying to linger because moving forward feels risky? What moments from our past are we trying to cling on to because they feel safer than what lies ahead? And how might God be using those memories not as hiding places, but as fuel. The good news is we never descend alone. The same Jesus who shines on that mountain walks every step down the hill with his disciples. He doesn't abandon them, doesn't tell them to face the future on their own. He goes ahead of them, carrying the weight that they cannot imagine. And because of that, the journey to Easter is not a march towards despair, but a path towards deeper trust. So yes, it's okay to want to stay on the hill. It's okay to miss those moments when faith felt easy and God felt close. But the story reminds us that love does its best work below the mountaintop. Resurrection does not bypass suffering. Easter does not happen without a long walk down. May we cherish the moments when God feels near. And may we have the courage to follow Jesus when he leads us onward. The mountain shows us who he is. The road ahead shows us why it matters. And Easter waits, not at the top of the hill, but at the end of the journey. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.